Rasheeda and Yandy, two of the most talked-about women in the hip-hop and romance sectors, have caused a stir that nobody saw coming. What began as fans all around the globe becoming enthralled with the drama, as whispers on the internet and speculations on podcasts, have abruptly escalated into a full-fledged brawl. In the last phase, Yandy did more than just defend herself. Even seasoned viewers were surprised by how sharply she said things. It was an absolutely incendiary statement that made waves on social media. Yandy suggests that the Rasheeda marriage is the cause, exposing long-kept truths and bringing up the infamous DNA test, which supporters thought had already been dropped. The audience could tell by the looks that this was more than reality TV. It was personal, because of the intense tension in the room, where every word was gushing fire. With both women unwilling to back down and making accusations that cut right to the heart of loyalty and family, viewers are already saying that this may be the most dramatic encounter in the show's recent history. As the dust begins to settle, one question hangs over the atmosphere. To what far would Yandy go to prove her point? Will Rasheeda provide additional information? That was the kind of fleeting grin Yandy was wearing. The kind of grin you had before revealing a brutally honest fact. She gave Rasheeda a direct glance. You could also feel years of frustration building. The room became chilly. Everyone was expecting another back-and-forth argument. But this was not going to be a straightforward fight. There was an impending storm. Yandy leaned forward slightly and spoke strongly, steady and sharp enough to pierce the atmosphere. She said that Rasheeda had covered too much ground and that it was now her turn to explain. Before her, Rasheeda didn't hesitate either. As if she had been waiting for this particular time, she instantly replied, increasing her voice and showing aggressive body language. She used hand gestures after every phrase. "You've made Kirk and me into a plot point," she said. "But your own life isn't as clean as you pretend it is," she continued in a harsh tone that was equal parts astonished and outraged. She planned to shake the table in order to make her point more clear. Onlookers couldn't take their eyes off it. Viewers had a feeling that this would be one of the most intense confrontations in hip-hop and romantic history, since comments were already flying across the screen. Yandy leaned back for a moment, then moved forward again, her eyes narrowing. She didn't raise her voice, yet her words were more forceful than any shout. Her words were tentative. "Your own husband had to swab your baby," she remarked. Keep it in mind. Everything in the room was quiet. It was one of those words that instantly alters the tone. People. Everyone gasped, the producers looked shocked, and the background actors paused in place. Rasheeda's cheeks flushed, her expression showing confusion as she struggled to form her next sentence. "You're lying," Rasheeda murmured, her tone vacillating between anger and embarrassment. She briefly explained my marriage, exposing the underlying anger, saying, "What happens in my house stays in my house." "I owe no one, even you," she said. Yandy raised her eyebrows and repeated, "Lying?" "The podcasts and interviews you performed in which you told half the story never occurred. Or do you just ignore the leaning closer?" her tone mocking now, and the fact that Yandy didn't allow her a chance to collect her breath. She made sure every camera caught every word she spoke. "You acknowledge things once others point them out to you?" When Rasheeda tightened her grip on the table and her head pivoted suddenly, causing her earrings to swing, the audience behind the cameras shifted uncomfortably, as if they recognized that this was no longer reality TV, but rather something unfiltered and intimate. The whole performance echoed with her anger, but Yandy remained undisturbed. "What you do, Yandy, is twist things. You have no clue what you're talking about," Yandy said coolly, dropping her voice to a frozen quiet. "No, I don't lie. And you play the victim after twisting people's comments. I only reiterated what you said before. Maybe it's easier for you to point the finger at me than to face reality at home." Her tone was smooth but heavy, and the tension was thick, as if she were letting Rasheeda sink in her own history. Even the crew members exchanged nervous looks as the two women dug further into wounds that had clearly never been treated before, raising the temperature in the room. Fixed. Pride, reputation, and the need to prove who really controlled the Let's get one thing straight, Rasheeda remarked, sitting forward and placing her hands firmly on the table as if she were anchoring herself. The DNA test wasn't the only issue. She went on, love and hip-hop legacy. I built my marriage, her voice as hard as glass. I fought for it. In any case, I never ran away despite our challenges. Can you say the same thing? Or do you spend too much time hurrying from one city to another? Are you trying to convince others that you would make a great wife? Her words came like daggers, each one designed to draw blood. Yandy chuckled bitterly and shook her head, saying, Perfect wife? No one said I was, but at least I don't keep pretending I'm not. Rasheeda, that's denial, not strength. You show off your marriage like it's a trophy, then act surprised when others point out its shortcomings. Among the captivated online audience, one individual commented, This is messy, but I love it. She went there. Yandy followed through on her assertion, saying, Memes popped on social media within photographs of Rasheeda's astonished look that have been going viral for minutes with tags like, Not the DNA test. But Rasheeda wasn't going to take it easy and let the internet mock her. Her eyes were burning holes into Yandy as she raised her chin in defiance. You think that old rumors and slander will bring me down? Please, I've survived more than you'll ever know. My name, my family, and my company. I was able to maintain my calm when everyone wanted to see me. And I don't need to prove anything to you, Yandy remarked, smiling and tilting her head as if she had been waiting for that exact reaction. Funny, she added slowly, almost too calmly, since you talk about me a lot for someone who doesn't have to prove anything. Have you been notified by Google about my name? You can't spend a day without talking about me. Her Rasheeda slammed her fist on the table, her voice exploding as the room erupted in tense laughter, the tone dripping with poison. Despite your incessant efforts to undermine me, your incessant comparisons to yourself and your fixation with me, Yandy, you will never be able to match me in marriage, business, or anything else. Rasheeda was no longer merely trying to save her marriage when the argument abruptly shifted from being defensive to being offensive. Yandy slowly stood up, her chair scuffing the floor, and started attacking Yandy's entire identity, her entire role on the program and her entire position within the brand. Compare, she continued, her voice higher now, raw with emotion. But I don't need to compare. I've already shown myself and built my kingdom. It sounded even more fervent. I've raised my kids. I've helped my partner go through things that most women would never get through. Don't compare me to you when half of your story is about you. Pretending that your home isn't falling apart. The room erupted in chaos, and the actors who had been quietly watching were suddenly trying to assist, their cries drowning out the noise as they gasped. But neither lady was prepared to make concessions. Conflict was now more important than words. Every camera zoomed in, recording every eye roll, every tear that brimmed, every sneer that expressed years of rivalry. This wasn't just another fight. The squad knew this kind of magnificent event would dominate the headlines for weeks. The air in the room had become so thick that one thing became clear. Neither lady was going to leave without saying something. Yandy stood tall and refused to back down, ready for another fight, squared her shoulders like a boxer, and fought so hard that the cameras seemed to tremble as they narrowed their focus. Rasheeda stood. Neither of them blinked, neither softened, and the silence between their next words carried an electric charge. Rasheeda was the first to break the silence. Her harsh tone and words intended to tear through everything, and the audience could feel their own heartbeats racing, as if they were actually in the middle of the storm. You want to take a seat? Her voice quivered only with anger as she replied, Come and trash my marriage? But your buddy has been out and don't act like you've been living in a dream world while you sit here berating me. You're looking like a fool on these streets. Her eyes narrowed and her lips curled back in a sneer. A calculated blow intended to hit Yandy where she knew it hurt most. Yandy's laugh was brief, bitter, and almost vile. Oh, so you want to talk about my boyfriend now? She shot back. I'm relieved that I don't have to wake up every morning fearing that the blogs will once again expose my marriage. At least when my issues come up. When others can see the problems, I don't sit there smiling and pretending nothing is wrong. Internet users submitted comments in droves. Another admirer posted, This is the real love in hip-hop. No scripts needed. Another admirer added, she didn't just say that. On social media, hashtags like R were already popular. Yandy vs Rasheeda and DNA receipts gained popularity in a matter of minutes. Memes started going viral on Twitter before the fight was even done. Rasheeda's eyebrows sprang up when she saw pictures of Yandy's. Icy expression with the words, "Not the DNA test." Rasheeda said, "You're a demon." Rasheeda had no intention of letting the internet mock her. She clapped again, more firmly this time. The audience watched as a digital explosion occurred. The one-liner was already making the rounds, being slowed down, replayed, and turned into instant TikToks. People were aggressively taking sides. Hashtags that caused the internet to divide into two groups, Rasheeda's Chatra Squad and Yandandi's Chatra Squad. But Yandandi was far from done. Her eyes were glowing hotter and she was speaking louder than ever. "Would you want to talk about how I'm not real? I'm glad I don't have to sit here and pretend I've never felt ashamed in front of my spouse. The whole earth. At least there are no concerns about my paternity or reports of DNA testing. Remember, Rasheeda, the people you are trying to fool are the ones who will never forget the truth." Rasheeda's hands were trembling, but she clenched them into fists and held onto the arms of her chair until her knuckles became white. She climbed slowly, her shoes striking the floor as she towered above. "Yandy, never talk about my kids," she screamed. "Don't you dare! Because you don't go over that line?" There was a gasp in the room. It took Yandandi a moment to understand the extent of the incision. But she didn't give up. When she leaned in to talk to Rasheeda, her nose almost brushed hers. "Then stop dragging. My name through the mud," she said forcefully. The workers scrambled, some trying to step in, while others remained in shock. The ranting became more intense, the insults coming out faster, each more caustic than the previous insult. "When you can't even keep order in your own home, stop acting like the franchise's queen." Online fans were unable to get enough of it. "This is iconic," one commentator said, describing the atmosphere as almost unbearable, like to a pressure cooker about to explode. "I've never seen them go this hard," another person commented, and others were dissecting every word, action, and emotion in whole Twitter exchanges. At that point, the battle was about legacy rather than scandals or weddings. The cameras zoomed in close, capturing the fire and wrath in their eyes, and it was about who would be seen as the true hip-hop and love queen, and neither lady was willing to give up that crown. Voices, in addition to the present total chaos. It was a historic event, and reality TV was no longer the only thing. The room was filled with shaking voices, but the loudest sounds were not from screaming, and the onlookers knew that what they were seeing would be spoken about for years to come. They came from the cameras, the gasps, the shocked silence, and they were anxious as they concentrated on each piercing look. Yandandi and Rasheeda stood motionless in front of each other, both of them motivated by years of hostility and years of admirers fighting about who in the series really wore the crown. The producers spoke to each other nervously, gold in front of them, but they also knew that things were going out of control, and some of the actors even tried to intervene. Their hands extended like a referee in a fight, but every time someone stepped in, Rasheeda or Yandandi would shout louder, forcing them to redirect the attention back to themselves. Rasheeda's voice could be heard above the chaos. "You're jealous, Yandy," pointing directly at her opponent. "That's the point of this. I've kept it down, and you can't stand that I'm still standing tall. While you're drowning, you smile for the cameras, but everyone can see that your life is falling apart." She sounded triumphant, as if she had struck the last blow. But Yandandi was unmoved. She smiled and cocked her head, with that dangerous poise that always added poignancy to her words. "Falling apart," she said, her voice calm yet piercing. "At least I didn't see my husband's shortcomings on national television while sobbing on a sofa. You refer to it as strength?" The world laughed and said, "No, Rasheeda, that's humiliation. You were the one who brought it about." The audience let out another collective gasp, and some of the ladies in the Bay Area shook their heads and grumbled to themselves, while others whispered that Yandy was only saying what everyone else had been thinking, And yet others were worried that she had gone too far. Online admirers were really split at the time. Yandy's supporters on Team Rasheeda called her cruel, while those on Tomer's team Yandy praised her for being brutally honest. As Yandy approached, Rasheeda's finger pinched her face, revealing fire in her eyes. Never bring up my suffering as though it were your own. A weapon. We call it loyalty. You don't know what it's like to save a marriage and stand by your spouse when everyone else is tearing him down. She hid the little break in her voice, shouting over Yandy before she could respond. Something that is obviously beyond your comprehension. As she pushed her palm away, Yandy's voice raised in anger. Dedication. Don't lecture me about loyalty since your husband couldn't even be true to you. Don't try to turn your pain into some kind of reward. In reality, you remained because you had nowhere else to go. Your whole brand depends on that connection. Chaos erupted in the room again, and you know it in your heart. Some people thought it sounded like screaming as the performers gasped. The producer shouted, "Cut the cameras!" But nobody listened. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the breakdown, and then, very unexpectedly, Rasheeda burst out laughing. You think that with your old stories? It wasn't the kind of laugh that was funny. It was cold and nasty, and it dripped poison. I'm still here, sweetie. I survived everything. Do you really think you can entice me along with headlines I've already encountered? Can you say the same? Will your story finish with you if your spouse decides he's tired of playing home? If my guy ever, since I created something of my own, I would still be standing if you left. Yandy said sharply, her lips tightening, her eyes narrowing with wrath. And she paused for a moment as the line hit hard, reverberating through the set like a gun fired in the dark. You built everything on a foundation of betrayal and lies, Rasheeda. Failed to make it. After reaching a compromise, you are now bitter and trying to drag everyone down with you. Some nodded in agreement with Yandy, while others shook their heads at the harshness of the discussion and mumbled to one another. Felt torn while using the internet. Yandy's voice then delivered another bombshell that no one had expected, one comment saying, "This is too real." Another saying, "They're going too far, but I can't turn away." Rasheeda, you've been avoiding them for years, but every single controversy lasts forever. And let's not forget the blogs. With all those headlines about your boyfriend going out, that resurfaced in the room. You think that time erases screenshots and that people forget all those receipts that people pulled up. Rasheeda's mouth dropped open in rage. "You're completely enamored with me," she spoke those words. "Are you obsessed?" It's sick, Yandy, to live your life as if you're keeping score. That's not power. You sit here and act like you're above me, yet everything you say is about me, and you have a lengthy list of my questions. Fixation. For the first time, Yandy's voice came close to a yell. No, that's me being truthful. The crowd leaned in as if they were waiting. But now you have to face me and I'm not holding anything back. You wanted to speak about me? That's me refusing to be quiet as you disparage me in interviews and podcasts. For the explosion, recordings went viral. Online followers begged for more, and just when it seemed that tension was rising, Rasheeda reversed the trend again, unwilling to go much higher. But let's speak about yours. How many times has he humiliated you? You keep talking about my man, she said, her voice suddenly steady and almost eerie calm. You don't scare me, Yandy. How often have we heard reports that he doesn't even want to be around you? The silence that followed was deafening. You're just better at hiding the fact that you're just as broken as the rest. Yandy's hands shook, not with fear, but with the rage of someone whose pride had just been ripped apart. And everyone knew that the dispute had entered that kind of silent, dangerous space. She moved closer until she was only inches away from Rasheeda, her voice shaking with anger as she snarled, Talk about me all you want, but never question the love that permeates my home. Never do. You may talk about my name, my business, and even my history, but don't talk about my family. The disagreement had become more than just a narrative or a rating issue. It had become a human one. The spectators knew that this was no longer just for laughs, that this was real pain, real injuries on display for the world to witness. The comment sections were flooded with statements such as, "This is too raw for TV," indicating that they could feel it. And before things got worse, someone stopped them. The weight of each phrase grew, however, and neither woman faltered, if anything more resolute. The cameras and fans were still, and every insult bore the weight of years of hostility. No one could turn away, and as the shouting lasted for a while, it was clear that this was not just a fight between two women, but also a struggle between reputations.